Hello, everyone. We still got some people coming in, streaming in, so we're going to give it about one more minute and then we're going to get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we'll be going over all of the great new features that we have introduced in our latest release, GLStudio 8.1. My name is Nathan Giroux. I am a senior software engineer here at the Disty Corporation, and I am the technical lead of the GLStudio project. Branden, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Branden Griffin, a software engineer here on the GlsStudio team, and excited to share with you the new features of GlsStudio 8.1.
Excellent. So we will be tag teaming this webinar today. So before we dive in to today's webinar topic, let me take an opportunity to introduce Disty to those who may not be familiar. So we've been around for a while. We were established back in 1994, and the first version of our GlStudio tool was originally released about back in 2000. And we released this as a tool for developing photorealistic cockpit trainers for the Department of Defense. And since then, we've branched out into embedded and safety critical. And at this point, we now have over 20 years of experience in HMI UI solutions in simulation, embedded, and safety critical. And to give you an idea of just how widely we are used, here are just a select few of our customers in industries ranging everywhere from aerospace and defense, automotive, outer space, medical, trains, agriculture, and much, much more. GlStudio is widely used in production of both embedded and safety critical embedded applications. For example, at Hyundai Mobis, GlStudio is used in a wide variety of different HUDs, clusters, and IVIs throughout several different car models. Additionally, Jaguar Land Rover has standardized on GlStudio, and GlStudio software is used throughout all of the IVIs and all of their lines of vehicles. And then on the safety critical side, we are using a variety of aircraft, including the simulators and ground stations for those aircraft. We collaborate regularly with our partners, as no production system is ever built in isolation. And we partner across disciplines, including OS and RTOS providers, hardware manufacturers, providers, graphics drivers, and user space software providers. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and dig into today's webinar material. And actually, something I want to point out before I even start on that is we have a question and answer section here in Microsoft Teams. So if you look at the top right corner of your screen, you should see a Q&A bubble. So as we are presenting this webinar, and you can come up with questions and queue them up for us so that when we get to the end, we can go through and answer all of your questions. So don't hesitate to submit some questions, and we'll be going through those at the end of the webinar. Excellent. So that being said, in GlStudio 8.1, we have introduced, among other things, GlsMapToolkt and GlsRSOLoader are now available on macOS. We have created a new and flexible, intuitive package-based ICD generator. We have introduced a new corpus of best practices workflow documentation, which serves as the next step after completing our existing tutorial content. And like all of our other releases, we have lots of good stuff, including bug fixes, quality of life, and other improvements, and much, much more. So first up, GlStudio on macOS. So as I said before, GlsMapToolkt and GlsRSOLoader are now available on macOS, and we've done even more work under the hood in regards to GLStudio on macOS. Additionally, GlsRSOLoader has been re-released for Linux for the first time in many years. Up until the 8.1 release, GlsRSOLoader was previously a Windows-only product. GlsMapToolkt is our simulation product for moving maps, supporting map data in several formats. And GlsRSOLoader is our product for loading arbitrary GLStudio content into an application without having to directly link the GLStudio runtime library. And as part of this webinar, I'll be giving a live overview of both of these products as they exist now on macOS. Other improvements include we have made the GLStudio editor on macOS a universal 2 binary. So this means that the Rosetta 2 emulation software is no longer required to run the GLStudio editor on the new Apple M1 Macs, as was previously required in GLStudio 8. This effort is our next step in bringing support to the macOS platform. Our first release supporting macOS was the previous release, GLStudio 8.0, and we have plans to bring further support to Apple platforms in future releases, including iOS support planned for a future release. To use GLStudio on macOS, we simply require a Mac that is still under software support from Apple. So that is to say, operating system version 10.15 or newer. A dedicated GPU is recommended, but GLStudio should run on any Mac, but a dedicated GPU will produce the best results. It'll give you the best performance. Otherwise, the only other software dependency needed to build, run, and deploy GLStudio content on macOS is having Xcode installed. And as I mentioned before, Rosetta 2 is no longer required to run the editor. All GLStudio software, including the editor and all runtime libraries and ancillary products, are all built as universal 2 binaries. So moving on to our live overview and demonstration of GlsMapToolkt. So GlsMapToolkt, as I said, is our moving map product designed for simulation use. It runs on all of the desktop platforms we support, that being Windows, Linux, and macOS. We support a variety of map file formats, including AIF, CADRIG, DNC, DTED, GeoTIFF, and shapefile. So this product is intended for aerospace and defense simulation purposes. In other words, it's not intended for embedded or automotive applications where you would say want a moving map for navigation in a car. This product supports multiple map projections, those being equirectangular, Mercator, and transverse Mercator. And we also support a dynamic map grid, which maps to the projection, as well as dynamic symbology out of the box. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through the GlsMapToolkt tutorial project real quick to show you some of the features that come with MapToolkt out of the box. For those of you who are already familiar with GlsMapToolkt, we've made several improvements in 8.1 that make its use even easier than ever. Because now GlsMapToolkt can be used in conjunction with our one-touch deployment workflow. So the project workflow is now supported in GlsMapToolkt projects. And we have introduced a starter project for GlsMapToolkt that contains all of the MapToolkt tutorial content, all deployed with the touch of a button. So with that being said, I'm going to switch over to my macOS PC to demonstrate. So let me get out of PowerPoint, and everybody should now see my macOS screen. So what you're seeing right now is my macOS machine via a capture card. So all the content is being streamed to my Windows PC, which I'm using to do the webinar. So the first thing I'm going to do is launch GLStudio on macOS, and we're going to create a new project. Something to keep in mind, you can check to see if you've installed MapToolkt. I've just scrolled the toolbox down to the very bottom, and you'll notice that if you have these 4 MapToolkt objects, that you are using an installation with MapToolkt installed. So I'm going to create a new project by clicking this button here in the top left corner, new project, and I'm going to select the GlsMapToolkt tutorial project bundle from the list. And I'm just going to call this My Project Map. Hit create. This will extract the GlStudio content, and this contains the completed Map Toolkit tutorial. The full steps to complete this tutorial from scratch are available on our doc site. So here we have all of the different content, including the customized GlsMapToolkt objects here in the scene. In addition, we have all of the sample code required to load the AIF map source for this project, which contains a lot of images from Google Earth. So I'm going to go ahead and run this project by clicking the Run button. So this is going to generate the code and compile the project for desktop macOS. So this is the tutorial project, and it shows off all of the basic Map Toolkit features, including all the things that you would expect from a moving map, like being able to zoom in. This is actually our office here in Orlando, Florida. Being able to zoom in and out, being able to rotate, being able to toggle overlays, being able to place dynamic symbology, which in the tutorial example is right-clicking. And then if I zoom all the way out, you can see that as I zoom out, new cell grids are starting to load. You can see the grid that is matched to the projection of this map. And GlsMapToolkt also supports the 3 map projection types, as I mentioned, those being, so right now we are in equirectangular, and then we can see Mercator. We actually rotate back. Mercator and transverse Mercator, in which case the meridian for us is centered on Orlando. So this is just one of the map formats we support, but with this example, it is very easy to integrate. You can simply switch over to your map type and begin with a fully fledged startup interface for being able to manipulate the map. And all of this being available on macOS. All right, I think I got everything there. Excellent. So that is GlsMapToolkt on macOS. So moving on to GlsRSOLoader. So as I mentioned, GlsRSOLoader is a wrapper library that makes it very easy to integrate arbitrary GlStudio content into your existing application. And previous releases being Windows only, but 8.1 not only revives existing Linux support, it also brings in macOS support for this product. Advantages include allowing your core application to be completely independent of GlStudio version. So not only do you not link the runtime, you can also load content, load GlStudio content from past, present, or even future versions of GlStudio into your application. The content that GlsRSOLoader builds must be built as an RSO, a reusable software object. In other words, a .dll on Windows, a .so on Linux, or a .dylib on macOS, built with GlStudio. And this RSO interface provides an opaque interface that allows you to access the underlying resource interface of that object, so you can manipulate the objects in a generic way. So the example we ship with GlsRSOLoader is based on GLFW. GLFW is a cross-platform API for creating Windows and OpenGL contexts. And this is just one example of how RSOLoader can be used, because RSOLoader is intended to be completely agnostic to the API that you use to create the window and OpenGL context. So our support site contains many other examples, including Qt, Glut, WPF.NET, and other integrations are possible, including but not limited to SDL2 and more. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through the GlsRSOLoader example really quick. The example is incredibly simple and easy to integrate. As you can see over here in the screenshot on the left side, that is the CMake script for this example that is able to build on all desktop platforms. So keeping that in mind, to build the example, you do need CMake installed on your machine. And then the content you run through this example, we provide a sample multifunction display as part of the example. But if you want to load your own content, you simply need to build content through the desktop CMake deployment with the build type set to dynamic library so that it generates an RSO that can be loaded by this example. And keeping in mind that this example, you don't even have to build this on a machine that has GLStudio installed. So it's completely independent from GLStudio. So that being said, I'm going to back up, go back to macOS and show the GlsRSOLoader example. I'm going to go ahead and back out of this. I'm going to minimize GLStudio and I'm going to bring up the folder where I have RSOLoader installed. So RSOLoader comes in an archive on Linux and macOS and comes as an installer on Windows. So when you unzip the archive on macOS, this is what you'll get. And it just has some includes and a library, static library for GlsRSOLoader, a very simple lightweight layer. And you'll also get the example, which I'm going to go ahead and open in a terminal. And I'll also open up in Finder here for good measure. So in the example, it has a CMake lists and it has a build script. You can take a look at the CMake lists as needed. You can use this as a starting point for a standalone project that loads GLStudio content. This is where GLFW is linked, so you could trade that out for another library, so on and so forth, that provides windowing and OpenGL context. And then to run the example, you simply launch the example shell script, which will call the CMake step, which will generate the project, and it will run the example. So this is an application that is not using GLStudio to create the window, but it is loading GLStudio content. It is fully interactive, just as you would expect. And this particular MFD was created actually from our aerospace cockpit tutorial example. So any content you create in GLStudio can be loaded into this standalone application, provided it is built as an RSO. And just to reiterate, this is just one of many potential integrations with GlsRSOLoader, and you can visit our support site and or talk to our support team for many other options as to places where GlsRSOLoader can be integrated to load GLStudio content. Okay, excellent. Moving on. So next up on our webinar, we have the quality of life roundup. So these are just a few features that are my personal favorites, I could say, that have come out in GLStudio 8.1. These include the isolate object feature, the copy paste behavior in the editor, and our F1 help hotkey improvement. So first up is the isolate object feature. So this allows you to draw an object. It allows you to see an object in the editor without having to manipulate the visibility of the hierarchy above it. So this allows you to see a specific object without having, even if it would be invisible in your scene, without having to change all of your hierarchy to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and show that right now. Let's get out of this, go back into GLStudio. The isolate object feature is triggered by the I hotkey. So for example, over here in the geometry tab, I have selected this GLSMap symbology object you can see selected. If I hit the I key, or if I press this button that I'm hovering over in the 3D canvas, it'll trigger the isolate object feature. If I press Z, it'll zoom into that object. So this will now draw only this object I have selected and nothing else. So I can very easily manipulate objects in a very complex hierarchy without having to change the visibility of objects. Bonus features, if you have isolate enabled but you have nothing selected, it won't show you, it'll actually turn it off until you select an object. So for example, I just clicked on this object and now this one object is isolated. And bonus, the isolate object feature works on multiple objects. So you can select multiple objects. I need to hold Command, not Control. And every object you have selected will be isolated. So a very useful quality of life feature to manipulate objects inside the GLStudio scene. And then just some other things I want to point out. The object copy paste order, you may have noticed in GLStudio that sometimes the objects don't copy and paste in the order you expect. That is because in previous versions, they would copy and paste in the order you selected them rather than in their draw order. From now on, objects will now always copy and paste in their draw order, so you should now always have expected behavior there. And we've also added some improvement to our F1 hotkey, which brings up our help. If you select an object in the geometry tab and you press F1, rather than simply going to the home page for our help, it'll actually bring up the page specific to that object. So very cool stuff on this front. So with all that being said, just to reiterate, the question and answer field is always open. And I'm going to go ahead and hand off to Branden to complete the topics for this webinar.
Thank you, Nathan. I'll be discussing some of the other major features we're introducing with GLStudio 8.1, starting with the ICD Generator Package. For background, the ICD Generator tool provided by GLStudio allows for the generation of an ICD, that is an interface control document, for a GLStudio project. The generated ICD provides a record of interface information for code items in the project, including geometry, methods, properties, and as you'll see shortly with GLStudio 8.1, also components and variables. So the ICD generator was previously built into the GLStudio editor, and here on the left we can see what the deprecated GLStudio ICD generator looks like. Moving forward with GLStudio 8.1, we've decided to improve the functionality of the ICD generator while also increasing its usability and flexibility. And that brings us to the ICD Generator Package. So the ICD generator has been revamped and ported into the package format. One of the great things about the ICD generator now being in package space is that it can be completely customized. If you find that you'd like to make modifications to it for use in your project, you are entirely able to do so. So the new graphical user interface for the ICD generator intuitively allows for the customization of data that will be included in the generated ICD. So you can select from components, geometry, properties, methods, or variables to be generated into the ICD. We also have this new feature, the wildcard data filter, which allows for additional control over the generated data. We'll talk more about that shortly. And then finally, we have the ability to generate the ICD as a readable Excel spreadsheet or as an interface format such as JSON or CSV. So now let's talk a little bit more about the wildcard data filters. These data filters can be created to define specific patterns that will be included or excluded in the generated ICD. So some of the different fields that you have the option for defining include or excludes include the name, data type, data range, and comments. There are a total of 10 different fields that can be specified in the include or exclude patterns. And an important note to make is that include patterns have precedence over exclude patterns. For example, you could choose to exclude all Boolean variables from the generated ICD, except those that have the name visibility in their name field. Now the big question, how do you use the ICD Generator Package? Well, starting with GLStudio 8.1 and moving forward, the ICD Generator Package is included in the default project template. So when you go to create a new project in GLStudio, you can use the default glsproject.zip project bundle, and you will immediately have access to the ICD Generator Package. For existing GLStudio projects that are upgrading to GLStudio 8.1, you will need to install the ICD Generator Package from the Package Manager. You can access the Package Manager by clicking the Manage Packages button on the top bar. So once you have a project with the ICD Generator Package installed, you can simply click the ICD button here on the top toolbar which will open the graphical user interface. Once you are satisfied with all of the configuration options you've selected, you can save those settings as a JSON file for future use. You can select the directory where the ICD will be generated, and then you can also enter a name for the ICD. Then you click the Generate button. Here is an example of what a generated ICD may look like. So the data is organized into several columns. We have the locator column, which describes the name of the item. We have the component instance name or containing component, if applicable. We have the category, which describes if the item is a property, geometry, or so on. And then we also have data type, data range, and some additional information. So let's go ahead and take a look at the ICD Generator package in action. So I'll go ahead and open up GLStudio here. We have a GLStudio project open with the interactive HUD tutorial. As you can see, there are numerous objects here in the Geometry tab. We also have some various code items, including properties, methods, and variables. So let's generate an ICD. We'll click the ICD button here at the top, which will open the graphical user interface. And let's see what the generated ICD looks like with all of the default options selected. Let's only generate as the readable Excel format though. So we'll uncheck these. We'll save these settings as ICD settings.json. So we'll just save that in the layout folder of our project. We'll select the folder to generate the ICD, which will also be the top level directory of the project. And then we will just generate the ICD with the name ICD output. So we'll click generate. And now if we open up the File Explorer and navigate to our project, in the top level here of our project directory, we will see the ICD output Excel spreadsheet. We can open that up. And here we can see all of the code items in the project. So we have numerous geometry, as well as the methods and variables and properties that are in the project. So let's close out of this. And maybe we decide that we don't need to see the geometry in the generated ICD. We can regenerate the ICD, but this time let's uncheck geometry. And let's just make sure that the settings are updated. So we'll save again. And now let's click generate again, this time with geometry unselected. We'll go back to the File Explorer and reopen that Excel spreadsheet. And now we will see only the methods, variables, and properties that are in the project. So you can see their name here in the Locator tab. The category describes what type of item they are, and then the rest of the columns describe the different information for that code item. So let's close out of that and go back to PowerPoint. And next, we're going to talk about the best practices workflows documentation. So with GlStudio 8.1, we have created a comprehensive set of introductory guides designed to make learning GlStudio easier than ever. This documentation covers the major aspects of the GlStudio development process, including adding behavior, art layout, as well as creating art and some other major topics. Each of these best practice workflow documents includes a summary of the workflow, a depictive diagram, and a simple example. The way that we view this best practices documentation is as a sort of choose your own adventure to follow through when you're creating a real application. As a note, we plan to expand the best practices documentation further in the next release of GlsStudio with accompanying tutorial videos. So keep your eye out for that. So if we take a look now at one of the major topic areas, creating 3D art, we can see that there is a table summarizing each of the included workflows for that major topic. So the table will include a summary of each workflow, as well as some pros and cons where applicable. And if we take a look at one of the individual best practice workflow documents, we'll see the summary, as we described earlier, which will introduce the workflow and include a list of high-level steps. And if you scroll further down, you will then find the diagram section, which provides a visualization of how the workflow interacts within a GlStudio project. So many of these diagrams will look something like this, showing the workflow in regards to the GlStudio project. And each diagram is also accompanied by an explanation. Then if you scroll down further, you'll get to the example. So each best practice workflow includes an example that provides a simple demonstration of how the workflow may be applied. So it has steps taking you through how to use the workflow and includes screenshots to help you visualize each step. So let's go ahead and take a look now at how we can navigate to this documentation on our docs site. So we'll go to a browser here. We'll go to docs.disty.com and click on the GlStudio documentation. And then we can click on the GlStudio 8.1 section. Also new with GlStudio 8.1 is some improved navigation features on our docs site, including some tables like the one you see here. So to get to the best practices workflows documentation from this top level GlStudio page, we can go under the Get Started section, where we'll see best practice workflows. So if we click on that, it'll take us to the top level of the best practice workflow documentation, listing each major topic area and included workflow. And now let's take a look real quick at one of these workflows. We'll check out importing art as images. So as we saw earlier, we have a summary, which introduces the workflow. We have a diagram, which shows how the workflow interacts within a GlStudio project. And then if we scroll down further, we have an example. So let's go back now to the PowerPoint. So if you are as excited about GlStudio 8.1 as we are, we have some great news, and that is GlStudio 8.1 is available for download as we speak. So if you'd like to check out the new ICD Generator Package, GlStudio on macOS improvements, bug fixes, and more, you can download your copy today. You can visit the download section of our docs site, docs.disty.com, or if you need assistance, reach out to our support team by emailing support@disty.com. And with that, we will now leave the floor open to questions.
Cool. So we have a few questions queued up. So as we go through those, we may get yet more questions. So let's take a look at what we've got here. All right. First question. Will RSO objects run on SC embedded hardware or just desktop environments? So the RSO interface is designed for desktop and embedded environments, but it is not intended for safety critical embedded environments. So under normal circumstances for safety critical applications are generally monoliths whose entire contents must be planned out and have requirements created in advance. So that's the reason for that. but RSO objects will run on any desktop or embedded environment. So the next question is, how do I upgrade to 8.1 from 7.0? Will upgrading my existing projects be labor intensive? In general, no. The upgrade process for going from an older version to a newer version of GLStudio is generally opening your project in the newer version of GLStudio and resaving. Since we generally do not remove anything from our API, we do deprecate things, but we don't remove things from our API. There will not be any code changes required by your project. And since you should already be using the project workflow, you should also be good in that regard as well. You should simply be able to upgrade the packages automatically. The only potential gotcha that I know of offhand from going from GLStudio 7.0 to 8.1 is that in GLStudio 7.1, we upgraded our underlying Python from Python 2.7 to Python 3. So if you've written any custom Python scripts that are specific to your project, in other words, not part of the packages that will be automatically upgraded, there could be a gotcha there. But if you have not written your own Python scripts, then you are completely 100% good. And if you do run into issues, you can always reach out to our support team at support@disty.com, and we will help you through any issues that you may encounter with your Python scripts. Okay. And then next question, is the ICD Generator Package compatible with the Safety Critical Deployment Package? So yes, the beauty of the ICD Generator Package is it is deployment agnostic. So it doesn't matter what deployment you're using. The ICD Generator acts on the GLStudio content within your design. It does not matter what target platform you go to. So completely independent of deployment. So it can be used with any deployment. Okay, let's see. More questions. Let's publish more questions. Okay, is MapToolkt an option or included in 8.1 desktop? So GlsMapToolkt does function on desktop. It is a desktop only product. MapToolkt is a separate purchase from core GLStudio. So this is something I probably should have clarified in the slides. GlsMapToolkt is a separate purchase from core GLStudio. GlsRSOLoader is not. GlsRSOLoader is a free add-on. So my apologies for not including that in the slides. MapToolkt is an additional is a paid product. RSOLoader is free with GLStudio. All right, more questions. So not questions, just some comments. Isolate feature is a big help, thanks. I agree. I love the isolate object feature. I just love it. All right. Other questions? We'll give it another minute or two for other questions. So the floor is open for anything you can think of. Anything you can think of, as long as it's GLStudio related. I will answer any question anybody has as long as it's related to GLStudio. Doesn't even have to be about the webinar. All right, we got another question. Okay, what hardware platforms are compatible with GLStudio? So kind of an open-ended question, but all major desktop platforms, for starters. In terms of embedded platforms, the only real requirement is that the hardware platform has a C++ compiler and supports OpenGL. So either ES if you're targeting embedded, or safety critical if you are targeting safety critical embedded. So on our website, we have a matrix of all the different hardware platforms we have already built our various runtime libraries for, but we are extremely platform agnostic. As I said, the only things that we require are a C++ compiler and an OpenGL driver implementation on that platform. If those two things exist, we can port and or build our runtime library for that platform. And also with GL Studio Micro in particular, we also support the Treveo 2 hardware. So that's a platform that doesn't support OpenGL that we also support through our GL Studio Micro product. So, all right. Great job. I'm excited to download the new version. Let's see. Publish. Let's publish some more questions. We got lots of questions. This is awesome. I'm glad to answer these questions. Okay, let's see. Next question. Will the macOS version eventually support IDEs other than Xcode like Visual Studio for Mac or Visual Studio Code? So technically the macOS versions technically supports it now. So Xcode happens to be what we used to build. CMake, let me formulate the answer to this question. The answer is we use CMake to generate projects on macOS. We actually use it for all of our desktop deployments and many of our ES deployments. So it is a matter of customizing the deployment to generate a project for an IDE that isn't Xcode. So Xcode just happens to be the default one that we use. But there is no reason that the desktop CMake deployment package can't be customized to generate a project for a different IDE that CMake supports. So if you're interested in pursuing this topic further, that is an excellent question to follow up with support@dist.com, where I or our support lead can follow up and help you make the necessary customizations to the desktop CMake deployment package to use a different IDE. Although I do believe you still need Xcode installed for the compilers. So you will still need Xcode for the compilers themselves, but I believe that you can use a different IDE if you need to or want to. Next question, if I have GL Studio 7.0, do I have to pay for GLS 8.1? The answer is no, provided that you are still under active support. If you are under active support, any and all GL Studio upgrades are free of charge. Next question, any update to the widget set UI for SC implementation? In GL Studio 8.1, not that I know of offhand. I'd have to go look. I think there were some bug fixes in GL Studio 8. I think was the last round of updates for the widget set UI for SC. Excellent. Any more questions? We'll give it another minute and see if we get any more questions. Okay, I'm going to give it another 30 seconds, and then we'll call it if there are not any more questions. Okay, I think we're going to call it. Excellent questions from everybody. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your attention and participation. I hope you all found the webinar informative, and we'll see you next time. Signing off.